All right, welcome aboard, everybody. Here we go again. We're into episode 8, and today I am going to be talking about a part of a book called TransEvolution. It came out in 2014, I believe, The Coming Age of Human Deconstruction. So the name kind of says, a little bit of it, TransEvolution. We're dealing with transhumanists, and I'm familiar with this book. I have not read this book, but I began reading it and just getting through the preface. It touches on some things that I felt were worthy of doing an episode over before I even get into the meat of the book. So it really sets the table. The author is Daniel Estulin. I recall seeing him a couple of times over the years on InfoWars, and I believe he was even in the film Endgame back in 2000, 2001, whenever that was filmed. And so he has been studying really the Bilderberg, New World Order, this group, whatever you want to call them, for literally decades. And he's, I think, based, I think it might be Italy. And so some of his stuff, a lot of his stuff isn't in English, but he wrote this book and had it translated into English so that we can all benefit. So let's dive right in. This is some wild stuff. So coming age of human deconstruction, and that's really what it's not coming. It's here. We're already experiencing it. So this just lays a little more of the groundwork and the understanding of how they're going about deconstructing the human mind. And go back to that reference I made in the 1984 episode where power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them back together of your own choosing. This is more of it, deconstruction. Okay, so I'm going to jump in. There's a lot here. I'll try to skim over some of it. I don't necessarily try to read every single word, but then obviously give you my sort of correlations and takes on this of how I see this playing out in other areas and what we're experiencing today. So shouldn't be too long. So I hope you hang in there with me. There's no really great climactic ending. It's just a lot of the same stuff throughout the whole thing. By the time you get to the end, hopefully you see the sort of totality of it all and where some of this, I will encapsulate it at the end with comments that I think are very significant about what we need to realize about this power structure that we're dealing with. Oh, here we go again. Okay, so let's go. So it's 2015, like I said, written in 2014. And so he's kind of wrapping some things up in his own mind and putting it out here on paper for us to organize. It is a time of great innovation and technological advancement. It is also a time of chaos and conspiracies, a time of financial meltdown across the world, a time of mass population displacement, and a time when the rich are becoming immensely richer and more powerful and more fearful by the day. In 2015, corporations have more power than any government on the planet. These corporations have bankrupted the governments and have made them subservient to the interest of the moneyed elite. The final merging of One World Company, Inc. is finally upon us. So a lot of what he says here, and again, written in 2014, it's 10 years later, we're seeing the manifestations of a lot of this. And we're heading into these sort of final phases of consolidation of government and corporate and humanity. Golden age of cheap energy is past. Competition for energy supplies dominates the economic landscape. Environmental degradation and intensification of agriculture and pace of urbanization has reduced the fertility of arable land. Food insecurity is causing mass migration on a global scale. There is severe water scarcity in some of the world's most densely populated areas. India, China, Pakistan provoking disputes in already volatile regions that is triggering military action and large-scale popular movements. Okay, so, and what I want to point to right out of the gate here, that I hope people understand, and I think those of you that are like-minded with me and this sort of stuff interests you, you get this, what I'm about to say, but I think a lot of humanity doesn't. And it's classic. We're in the middle of a Hegelian dialectic problem, reaction, solution operation that is global, okay? Because they have their think tanks and their experts and their meetings, and they discuss how the world is going to be in the future, and they say it as if they have no control. And this is just sort of the the natural evolution of human societies and civilizations. And that's disarming to the average, normie that might read it and go, oh no, look at all these things that are going to happen. What should we do? We should turn to these people, the ones who are writing it, because they're going to be our saviors. Well, that's Hegelian dialectic. And everything that I just read in this paragraph, cheap energy has passed, they're shutting down energy supplies. Competition for supplies dominate the landscape, which will become more intense, absolutely. Environmental degradation, intensification of agriculture, they're creating a lot of that. Pace of urbanization has reduced the fertility of arable land. Food insecurity is causing mass migration. They're creating that. They're destroying some of the food infrastructure, blowing up power plants, creating fires, rail systems, derailments. What was one of I read a while back that 40%, the nitrogen, I guess nitrogen is a significant component in our agricultural process worldwide for healthy growing of crops. And I think I read that 40% of the nitrogen supply has been cut, meaning the ability to manufacture nitrogen has been cut by 40%. So millions of people just by that alone are going to starve and are probably already starving. And that began in 2020. And you see in some of the other countries over in Europe, overseas, where the farmers are fighting back because they're trying to get people off their land. They're trying to get them to shut down their production of food. They're forcing this, yet they make it sound like it's just something that's happening. And we need to know it's not. Everybody out there needs to know that the people that are offering to help us with how the future is going to be are the ones creating the future. And we need to hold them accountable and not just run yelling and screaming and get mad at our neighbors, which is what they will eventually push us to. All right, so the water security, same thing. Water security in some of the world's most densely populated areas. And this one too. That's always been an issue with settlement of humans in population centers, is being able to build the infrastructure to supply water and food and whatnot, create a healthy environment. And we could have, wherever they're talking about here, India, China, Pakistan, we have the technology, we have the means, we have the money, we have everything that we need to build adequate water supplies wherever there are large populations of people gathered. We have it. They're not doing it on purpose. They're starving those systems, this infrastructure, on purpose, so then they can create these disasters that will then allow them to offer the solutions. And I can give you an example of seeing that firsthand that I've witnessed is living in Seattle. I grew up there, moved away, then I moved back in the 90s at some point and was there till about 2008. And during that time, as I became more aware of environmental issues and the New World Order and that sort of tug of war, every summer in Seattle, we're talking a place where it rains almost every single day. Every summer, the mantra, the fear-mongering, there's not going to be enough water. We're going to have to ration. You won't be able to water your lawn. You're going to have to go on cycles, and we're going to have to conserve. And I'm thinking, it's raining as I'm reading it, right? I mean, it's just so absurd that in a place like Seattle, Washington, that they are saying that we don't have enough water. And the reason they don't have enough water up there is because they absolutely refuse to increase water capacity, water retention capacity. If you're familiar with the area, you drive up over Snoqualmie Pass, I-30, and there's these huge reservoirs, and that supplies a lot of the water for the Seattle area. Well, they haven't, those were built, 60, 70 years ago, 80, I don't know how long ago, but before my time, they were there. I can remember driving that way as a kid, and those reservoirs were there. And so they just refuse to expand. They refuse to expand. They are just rabidly, maniacally anti-growth, and they're adherent to the agenda. And they say that it's to preserve the environment. Well, you can do all these things while still preserving the environment overall. You're not going to destroy the planet by building another reservoir up in the Cascade Mountains. So the millions of people, especially the hundreds of thousands or potentially another million or so that have moved there in the last 20 or 30 years. can have water. So it's artificial, it's fake, they're lying, and they're trying to appeal to your sense of emotions and protection of Mother Earth so that they can starve you to death and they can destroy your ability to survive in the cities that they've helped create. This is all manufactured, it's all orchestrated, and it's all absolute bullshit. And so anybody out there running around with their signs about saving Mother Earth, you're just a tool, you're a fool, you're a useful idiot. It's not about saving Mother Earth. They're trying to consolidate humanity, and they're going to do that by restricting all of our resources. It's artificial. So, I mean, we're not even in the second paragraph. There's this, they're telling us this is what's going to happen because they're creating it. Humanity is imperishable because they're putting humanity in peril by not investing in the infrastructure that before this agenda, they were, look how we built America. The railroads, the dams, the cities, the infrastructure, the power grids, the highway systems. We were able to build all that at one time. How come we can't do that now? It's a political, economic, social choice. That's why. We're being ruled by psychopaths. Change is inevitable. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. Channeling a little John Cougar Mellencamp. It's a good song. Several top secret government studies, both in the United States and the United Kingdom, predict an eerie future. They predict an eerie future because they're creating an eerie future. Over the next 25 years, the world will turn into a Big Brother nightmare where small, rich elite thrives on the backs of a starving population. This is their future. This is their worldview. This is their humanity that they're creating. I mean, think if we wanted to create a positive humanity, and we had all the money and power that these people had, and they actually were benevolent, and they were pro-human. Think of what this would read like. It would be all the great accomplishments that we're achieving and all that we have to look forward to as we work to, get rid of the challenges that we're always going to have because of human nature. There will always be evil, but it can certainly be limited. Whereas now we're turning the whole thing into an evil system of absolute dystopia. All right, and it'll get a little faster. I just had to lay some groundwork here because that's really a big deal. Understanding the Hegelian dialectic and that they're creating all of these reports that you read that I'm going to refer to here, and I'll even show you one of them. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Tavistock Institute, the Club of Rome, Stanford Research Institute, all of the Ford Foundation, all of these institutes that think tanks that are coming up with all these policies for the future. They're building the roadmap because that's the future they want. They begin with the end in mind. Okay. All right. The concepts of democracy and freedom will have disappeared only to be replaced by high-tech dictatorship. It's happening based on surveillance, monitoring, mass media indoctrination, police suppression, and a radical division of social classes. The vast majority of the citizens live in third world conditions and are constantly subjected to poverty, famine, sickness, and extermination. By 2015, the elite see the opportunity to advance mankind towards a new dark age. The opportunity to advance us to a new dark age. They're sprinting us to a new dark age. That's the goal. It's just unbelievable. But taking the reins of Darwin's perversely racialist survival of the fittest, natural selection, evolution theory, and applied social principles to develop social Darwinism. To most, this may read like a plot from a dystopian Hollywood science fiction film, but I assure you, this is real. It is all around us. I've been saying this for years. So he's sort of echoing, I get it. That's why when I read this, I was like, this is good. We need to talk about this. And a lot of times, rather than me just sitting here and rambling for an hour about all this stuff, it's great to have these resources because then I can say, hey, look, this isn't just some guy talking. Because I've read stuff. I'm showing you their words, which this is Daniel Estulin's words, but we will begin to reference some of these studies that he's referring to, where he's drawing these conclusions. That, to me, is the power of conversations like this. This is their words, and that's what I've shown you in other episodes that I've done. It's their own words. I'm just a repeater here, trying to get the word out that this is what is coming. All right, to most, it's all around us. These are the conclusions of a report prepared by the British government in December 2006. UK's Ministry of Defence prepared the source document on the future of humanity. The report itself was based on top secret negotiations that took place at the conclusion of the Bilderberg Conference, 2005. I'm not going to even try to read that. Hotel in Germany. This group was handpicked by the Bilderberg Steering Committee in January 2005. At a January 2000 Bilderberg pre-selection meeting, national representatives of the Bilderberg group were asked in absolute secrecy to put together a working group and prepare detailed reports on population, on natural resources availability, on conflict prevention, on economic issues, etc. The conclusions of the report, along with the conclusions of the Bilderberg meeting in May, would be further discussed during the secret May 9 and 10 meetings at the Ringberg Castle. Nobody except the Bilderberg Steering Committee and a select group of Bilderberg's most powerful members knew that this post-Bilderberg meeting even took place. The meeting would define the future of humanity, and its objectives were no less than Promethean. Okay, and this Ringberg Castle, man, sometimes, here's the talking about some of this. Bavarian Alps Castle, created by Duke Leopold, ruled Bavaria for over 800 years. And that's where this power structure didn't just turn up in our generation. The people that are running it are the descendants and however they manipulate people in and out of that power structure. It's been around a long time. And these people are sitting on trillions of wealth. They own the castles. They're our overlords. And they stay in hiding. They stay in hiding and they trot out people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates as the richest men in the world when they're not even close. They're puppets. Their billions are nothing compared to what these people own. And so these ruling elites, that it talks about here, the ones that are in this club, they're the puppets of the guys behind them that we don't even talk about. So, this thing goes up to a top. And by the time you get down to our politicians, we're like at the third, fourth, fifth layer of puppet. Okay, the people selected were the cream of the crop of the Bilderberg elite. So you had people like Rockefeller, Tim Geithner, please, Richard Haas, Alan Hubbard, Henry Kissinger, Peter Sutherland, and Paul Wolfowitz. I mean, those were some of the names that I recognize. A lot of them are foreign experts, supposedly, or high-ranking officials. There's even where is she? Anyway, it doesn't matter. The queen of whatever. Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. What? And because the Netherlands is a major power base for these maniacs. Okay, so she's special, handpicked, of course, and probably a descendant for hundreds of years of that area, something like that. So much more to the social structure of this group than people realize. They barely even mention any of their names. Okay, these men and women were planning no more and no less the future of mankind. What they decided behind closed doors, the Ringberg Castle would 2 years later become the backbone of the most far-sighted report in human history. And the other thing about this, that this small group of people were going to discuss and plan the future of all mankind. How can that be? How can such a tiny group be planning the future of all mankind? And I'll go back to my episodes on silent weapons for quiet wars. The concept of economic shock testing, when they were able to say that they can regulate the price of gas, let's say, create a gas spike, and they can watch the reverberations throughout the economy and the reactions of the populace. And then they feed that back into their control systems. Well, and my comment then was, that shows you the power they have. They control these prices, these people. You think you live in a free market? Maybe a little. But at the end of the day, it's only as free as they allow it to be. The prices will only go so low as they allow them to go. And they will go as high as they decide to let them go when the time comes, as they've done in the past to do part of their economic shock testing. So that, to me, is a pretty significant insight to take away from this, that a small group of people are planning the fate of all humanity, and they believe they have the power to implement it. And from what I've seen, they do. So whether you believe it or not, crazy conspiracy nut stuff, whatever. It's up to you. I'm just giving you the information. All right. Using the British government as once removed deniable cutout, Strategic Trends 2007 to 2036. The 91-page report is a blueprint for UK's future strategic national requirements through the analysis of key risks, future shocks to the world's financial, economic, political, demographic, and technological areas. Strategic Trends report is the backbone of the United Kingdom's defense policy. Okay, so they're saying this is what came out of it. And I did some searching for that. I found the third edition. So this is not the original iteration of this. And they've cleaned it up a little bit. and changed some of the verbiage a little. I did not scour through the entire document, but I went through, maybe the first third of it, identified some of the areas where it was referenced in the book from the original document. What they cleaned up is they're not as absolute. Well, this will, or this may, or it's likely, or possible. They're framing things in a little more nebulous terms as opposed to absolutes, but this is what's exactly going to happen, because they've already realized since 2007, this report started when they created it in 2005, that their timeframes are off, and they always are. That's the thing. You know the agenda, we just don't always know the time frame. And those timeframes can ebb and flow depending on how effective and successful their operations are toward, steering humanity down the path that they want. And that's where I was blown away when I saw what they did in 2020, because I felt like they were pretty far behind in their agenda. And they're smart enough to know they can't just, bam, just hit us over the head with it. You got to nudge us along. Well, something shifted. And by 2020, they decided they're going to hit us over the head if they have to. And they're implementing it, whether we are ready or not, whether we agree or not. And that's where they made the calculation. You hear, Klaus Schwab, we have to prepare for a more angrier world. They've decided, you read Operation Lockstep, the world's going to get more angry. And they know that because they know the things that they're doing, humanity hasn't been completely conditioned enough yet to accept it peacefully. And they've decided, you know what, screw it. We're going ahead. We're going to hit our time frames. And if they're going to fight back, they feel that they've got enough of power and response systems in place to control it. And they don't care how many of us they have to kill. So they're prepared for a more angrier world. And as soon as humanity rises up, they're going to start cutting them down. So we'll see how this plays out. But that's, this report here, it's you can see they're kind of massaging the numbers a little bit by the time you get to the third edition. But the content is still there. The end result is still there. And I believe now you're going to see more and more of just flat out authoritarian execution of their agenda. We're headed for that. All right, so let's go back to, and again, I'm showing you this because it's like strategic trends. He quotes right to it. Here's the document. Download it. It took me 2 minutes to find it online. I do want to do some research and find the original one because I'd like to see how much they've shifted. But it's there. This is real. This organization, Development Concepts and Doctrine Center, these think tanks, they're laying it all out, and most people are oblivious because most people with their attention spans do not have the bandwidth mentally, intellectually, whatever, attention-wise, whatever, to sit down and read a document like this. And that's partly why I like to do these. I like to do this because if you can spend an hour with me and walk through this, you're going to get hours and hours and hours and hours worth of research just downloaded to you between what we cover and the commentary and benefit of I've been absorbing this stuff for decades. I've been reading and consuming, and I'm obsessed with it because I want to know. I don't want to be surprised when they kick my door in. I'm like, oh, what took you so long? Been expecting you. All right, so Strategic Trends Report's the backbone of the UK's defense policy, and it's in effect, globally, it's being implemented. By 2015, over 50% of the world's population will be living in urban rather than rural environments, and I think the Trends Report, the most recent one, says by 2035 or 25, 60% of the world's population will be living in urban rather than rural environments. So they're pushing us into these urban centers, and let me read this first. Poor housing, weak infrastructure, visible marginalization, social deprivation, differential levels of poverty, and a sense of grievance will increase in significance and become major political issues based around transnational moral justice agendas, including violent activism of varying intensity and impact. Okay, first and foremost, the consolidation of humans into these urban centers. And this is what they're going to look like. Poor housing, weak infrastructure, increased, violence, all of that. And one of the things to look at today that's happening is, the acceleration of importing third world migrants, right? Where are they taking them? Taking them to the cities. Okay. You may not feel threatened threatened by that today because your city is still safe and fine. But eventually, when all this collapse comes and they take it all down, watch the movie Dredd. Not the first one, Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone. Watch the one that came out several years ago, Dredd. That's what they're building. You're going to live in a structure that's going to house thousands of people. And some of those people are people that are coming across the border right now. And if you're white, they're not going to like you. They're not going to like anybody. These are more tribal, lesser developed regions. They don't have the same social skills. I posted something, might have been on Twitter, and it was just insanity. The maniacs that they're letting in, running around screaming with knives and just killing anything. It's just going to get bad. So you're going to be in a confined environment. Humanity is. It's going to have all these elements, and it's going to be right outside your door. Okay. And so if we don't stop this, so that's why I want to talk about these things. I'm not hiding from this. I'm not going to sit here and talk about utopia all day long. This I want to put in everybody's face and see, now you tell me how you can justify ignoring this and pretending it doesn't exist. How you can just watch the football game and cheer for your sport and say, well, we don't talk about politics. That's just it's not proper social etiquette. Well, what's proper social etiquette going to be when all of this is happening? So why not get involved now? Why not be more vocal now? Why not try to wake up your neighbors now? Why not try to form groups and organizations and teams of people that can begin to at least organize in your own communities so that when this stuff starts to happen, this chaos starts to break down, that you're going to have a response, you're going to have a shot. Because the sleeper cells, the hordes, the violent, just all of it is going to be at some point in your community. They're coming. There's just millions and millions of them pouring in. And I don't know if they're going to unleash it all next week, next year, or 2030. I don't know, but that's the future. And they're telling us here. They're telling us in so many words, hey, different levels of poverty, significance in major political issues, moral justice, all this. It's including violent activism. So the angry racist that wants to bash your head in with a skull because you have more than him, they call that violent activism. And they're okay with it. Just like they're okay with the stores being looted and, gangs of, marauding, they're barely teenagers running around, just robbing, looting. In the 2020 riots, not only are they okay with it, they're the ones creating it, funding it, organizing it, and unleashing it in certain instances to a large degree. All right, now let's continue on. In all but the most affluent societies, most of humanity will continue to experience hardship, and absolute poverty will remain a global challenge. We can solve it all. You see those commercials where it's like, oh, please give what you can to, UNICEF or the Salvation Army or this and that, and they show the third world, the little kids, it's just bones, just starving. We could fix that tomorrow if the power and the money was in the right hands. The wealth is there. The accumulated wealth is just unbelievable. We could fix it all tomorrow. And this, when I was younger, is what I thought we were doing. When I was naive and immature, as a young man, that we were spreading our democracy around the world, and we were helping build infrastructure, helping build clean water, helping build cities and governments and the civil society. We, to the extent we can do that, we should be. And instead, we've just left it all to rot. And it's a despicable indictment on where humanity is right now. And these people got their boot on our necks, and that's part of it. What are we going to do? All right, increased risk of humanitarian catastrophe caused by a mixture of climate change, fake, we're creating it, resource pressures, blowing everything up, uneven distribution of wealth, orchestrated collapses, always works in their favor, the effect of disease and vaccines, unleashing COVID and other things, right? This is all stuff they're doing. None of this is naturally occurring, people. None of it. And the failure of authorities to cope with population growth and urbanization. It's not the failure of authorities. They're not putting the structures in place. They're not investing in them. They're not doing the training. They're doing the exact opposite. This is just unbelievable gaslighting to read this and not see that. And they're making it sound like they're just, we've collected this data and now we're going to offer you some solutions. Don't buy it, man. Don't buy it. It's all crap. All right. Between 2007 and 2036, world's population go from 7 to 10 billion. Lack of food, water, medicine, proper hygiene, education, and basic human necessities could spell collapse, which is what they're creating. They're doing all that. Growing gap between majority and a small number of highly visible super rich is likely to pose an increasing threat to social order and stability. Again, it's planned. Faced by these challenges, the world's underprivileged might unite using access to knowledge, resources, and skills to shape transnational processes in their own class interest. Okay, we'll get into some more of that. Let's hold off here for a second. The result of the growing desperation on the part of humanity will result in civil war, intercommunal violence, insurgency, pervasive criminality, and widespread disorder. All right, we'll go a little further. I think there's another part here I want to read before I bring this point up. Faced with financial markets on a downward spiral to hell and a global economic collapse, the report predicts a severe pricing shock, silent weapons for quiet wars. They create it, they control the pricing, so they control the shocks, okay? Possibly caused by an energy cycle, maybe, or a series of harvest failures, which they're creating, which would trigger a domino effect involving the collapse of key international markets across a range of sectors. The impacts of this collapse transmitted throughout the global economy could result in a breakdown of the international political system and complete economic collapse. And one of these things that could be the linchpin is the de-dollarization of world economies. Right now, the US dollar is the world currency, and if you're paying attention to these issues, you know that other countries are forming groups and alliances to break away, and some already have broken away from conducting business in US dollars. And right now, there's trillions out there in currency that if all that gets sucked into the US Treasury, it's economic collapse. If the US dollar is removed as the world currency, that could be the linchpin to trigger all of this. So, and that's could be right around the corner. Okay, the groundwork has already been laid. They're already working on it, and the news pundits on TV that are gaslighting you into compliance and to do nothing, or telling you that it's happening, but you're not supposed to worry about it. They're not telling you anything about that, right? They're just telling you it's happening. And then when it happens, they'll tell you what's going to happen next. But they're not going to help, and they're not trying to help wake people up. All right. Even with the erosion of civil liberties, the super rich will be protected through technological advancements and pervasive surveillance. See that surveillance? That's where they've done the calculations. If you watch any of my other episodes, silent weapons for quiet wars. They know we're conquered. They've done the calculations, and the reason they've decided, like an Operation Lockstep, that they're moving forward, they've got the technological advancements and pervasive surveillance in place that they feel is going to protect them when all of this comes out and it breaks down. It's all a chess game, and it's all pieces that they've put together and made decisions off of. And so now here we go. All right. With intrusive, highly responsive, and accessible databases, the emergence of a so-called surveillance society will increasingly challenge assumptions about privacy with corresponding impacts on civil liberties and human rights, of course. Independent countries will be replaced by megacities. They're going to round us all up because you're bad for the environment. You can't be out on your 100-acre ranch. You got to come into the megacities because it's dangerous out there. Ever watch the movie The Island? That's a good one. Kind of touches on this. The earth is toxic. You have to stay in this little shelter, huge mega shelter they built. Anyway, I won't give away the movie. It's worth watching if you like to watch this sort of stuff that tells you what's going on here. And it's a good movie. Highly recommend it. Report defines a megacity as a large city in a developing region with a population base of over 20 million people. Caused by a massive population displacement, cities will swell to unimaginable proportions. Well, if you're saying it's unimaginable, why don't we imagine it and come up with better solutions? No, can't do that. Which will already have experienced endemic lawlessness and high levels of violence. Unable to cope with an influx of peoples, the megacities will fail before 2035. The effects will be equivalent to state failure, which city failure may in turn precipitate. Based on recent experiences in the United States, the military stabilization of a major city could demand martial law, which is what they want. Technological advancement and supremacy will require that wars be fought not on state basis, but rather as endemic, urban-based, irregular conflict against adversaries with highly developed urban survival and combat skills. These are called social turbulences, okay? So I'm going to get into here eventually, here in a couple minutes. This highly developed urban survival and combat skills. A lot of that's sort of patriots, preppers, all of that. So they're planning. They already know what's coming, and they're preparing for it. The theory of social turbulence. Oh, this really is diabolical. Theory of social turbulence, a so-called softening up effect of future shocks, was developed by two prominent psychologists, Eric Trist and Frederick Emery, wherein a population could be softened up through mass phenomena such as energy shortages, economic and financial collapse, or terrorist attack, if the shocks were to come close enough to each other, and if they were delivered with increasing intensity, then it was possible to drive the entire society into a state of mass psychosis. And again, I go back to silent weapons for quiet wars. One of the bullet points is create insanity. So instead of trying to tap into our best human potential and bring it about and help us achieve it, this is what they're trying to accomplish. They've war gamed with the best and brightest psychologists, sociologists, human behavioral experts, and they've done all this testing on the human mind to figure out how it works. And these are the results that they want to create. And so they're saying, oh, okay, here's, and just like MK Ultra stuff, it's the worst form of evil, but they've mastered it and it's real. And they're doing it right now. Is the world starting to feel a little more crazy? Do you see the acceleration of these events where it's hard to even keep track of? I remember the Maui fire. We've had 100 things since then. And what about, I just read something on that the other day, and it's like they're getting just pushed. They're getting crushed by the government, by everything. Their mortgage, they're getting pushed out. And nobody cares. I just say nobody. There are people out there trying to do something about it, but you don't hear about it in the news anymore because we've had 100 similar events that just keep steamrolling event after event, and they're just pushing it on us, forming this mass psychosis. Okay, and this is human nature. I mean, if you like PTSD, I'm no expert on it, but I know that if you're exposed to stress beyond what you believe is your capacity to absorb, it creates a reaction. A psychological reaction. That's the PTSD component. Your mind sort of checks out. Okay. And they know that, and that's what they want to push us toward. They want to push us toward this mass psychosis where we mentally are just checked out. We can't function anymore. It's just too much. And I've seen examples of this just in just professionally, as decades of worked in business environments with other managers, and I've had teams of managers, and bringing up a new manager and watching them react to the new demands of a pressure. This is just a job, a paycheck, right? And watching them as they go up this escalation ladder of their stress level when the problems of being a manager that they're not used to as just a line level person start to hit them. And they just keep coming. This didn't work, that didn't work, this person's doing this, that's doing that, this didn't arrive, this broke down, and I've seen several times where they reach a point where it looks like they're about ready. They've exceeded their ability to cope with the stress that they're enduring. And I've had opportunities to coach those people and say, okay, this is where you are. And that's okay, because this is all new and you're feeling overwhelmed by it. But what you'll find, if you push through it and you make that mental adjustment, you'll realize that you have new levels of coping mechanisms. You just have to build those neural pathways. You've just got to put your mind down that pathway and accept that challenge and normalize it. You've got to tell yourself that my mind is stronger than anything that's happening around me. And it can be. And I've seen managers that couldn't do that, and they fell back and were not successful and had to sort of go in a different direction. And I've seen managers that were able to make that adjustment. That's all this is. They're ramping this stuff up, and the average, normie out there that's just oblivious, walking around on autopilot, they're not going to know what hit them. They're not going to have any of these tools. Their mind, they're just going to get run over. And they're going to be running around the streets with their hair on fire, just absolutely psychotic. But if you understand it's coming, and that's part of getting the message out there, this is what's coming. We not only have to prepare physically for this, whether it's food supplies, water supplies, survival, preppers, stuff, whatever you want to do, but we have to survive mentally. And that's part of why I'm doing these videos, because mentally, this is coming. That's what I'm saying. This is coming. Prepare yourselves in every way. I think mentally, I've done a lot to prepare myself. One area I'm not as prepared in as I have been in the past is physically. I've gone through some stuff, haven't been to the gym, I'm not working out as regularly, and I know it. And I know when life gets harder, that's going to make my life harder. And so I need to fix that. So physically, mentally, emotionally, materially, we have to prepare. And this is a big part of it. And, people like this, Eric Trist, Frederick Emery, they've prepared these studies because they're now going to implement this, and they're already implementing it. And it's coming. And they've done the research, and they know how humanity is going to react. And so what I'm saying is, no, let's not give them the satisfaction of running around like gibbering idiots. When they do whatever they do, normalize it. Anything that happens going forward is normal, because the old reality is gone. It's gone. You see a plane fly into a building, that's normal. Now, I'm sorry, I don't mean that to sound like I don't care. I care deeply. I'm ready to do something about this. I want this to change. But don't be horrified by it. Don't be horrified and emotionally tapped out by anything that you're about to see coming, even if it happens on your own street, in your own neighborhood, because it's coming and it's going to be real. And if you can normalize it, you can cope with it, you can react better to it mentally, and it gives you a better chance of surviving. And that's what it's all about, surviving these maniacs' radical agenda. Okay, that Eric Trist and Frederick Emery have helped create these systems of absolute mass psychosis. Okay, people would withdraw into a state of denial, retreating into popular entertainments and diversions while being prone to outbursts of rage. I know we're seeing that. People are just, the anger's rising, folks. You see it, and the tolerance is going away. Increasingly, regular military forces will deploy in environments where armed regular forces, for example, armed followings, gangs, bandits, semi-official militias, private military companies, terrorists, and insurgents are operating, often as adversaries, but sometimes as neutrals or even as partners. All right, this is where I want to talk about this issue. Read that. This is what they say is going to be on the streets of America in the future. Okay? Gangs, bandits, semi-official militias, private militaries, terrorists, insurgents. That's going to be normal. And so a couple of things. One is they know that a portion of this populace is going to be the patriots, ex-military, people that, they're hard targets. And that's a good thing, right? And so they know that's what they're up against. I think in my last video, they said that they know they're out there, and at some point they're going to have to deal with them. That's coming. But the other thing is, they're importing these people, the gangs, the bandits, the terrorists, and the insurgents. They're importing them right now. They're building the armies, the sleeper cells, and they're going to unleash it all at some point. And we have to be prepared for it. And there isn't a damn thing I can do about it today, or you. What can we do today? I can watch them move in, where I live, down the street. I can't do anything. They have the freedoms and liberties of America because they're here with the government's blessing. And you, as just a tiny little American with no power, are not going to stop it. We're not going to stop it until they wage war. And they will when they're told. All these groups will be activated, and they will wage war on the streets of America. And then we'll see what we're about. And until then, prepare. And that's why, my last, my last episode about, the historical aspects of the warfare from that figure from that movie. People were used to warfare back then. Men, all men of those civilizations, they were raised, to a certain degree, most of them with, I don't even know if militaries but training that made them hard targets because they knew they might be called upon to defend those civilizations. We haven't had that in a long time. I've seen those videos, those 60s, physical education videos where all those guys, they all look the same. They're all built the same. They're all lean, strong, and they're jumping around on, ropes and barriers, and that used to be normal. That's gone. Look at the average school ground now. Look at the average high school. They're not ready. And so if we can just here's the thing. If we don't even have to mobilize physically. I think there's energetic elements here. And I've described this before in other videos, not recently, but I'll use an example from last summer where I was walking out of a Target store on a Sunday morning. And it was October 1st, because I remember the day because it was the first day there were chemtrail planes flying. And they let us off all summer so they could run their climate hysteria hoax. That's why they let us off. So we had a nice summer here. Blue sky every day. It was awesome. October 1st hits, just planes flying all over. I walk out, and it's so obvious and so noticeable. It's like an assault. I'm being assaulted. I'm under assault. And I just see it, and there's this instant, reaction, like, man, you want to do something about it. Something's not right. And I look around. It's a huge parking lot. People coming in and out, milling about. I look around, and it's like, nobody else sees it. Nobody's responding. Nothing. Everybody's just milling about, just oblivious to the assault that is happening over them. And how I described it is, imagine, in my version of civilization, coming out of the store, we would all see it, and people would be pointing, like, wow, what's that? I don't know. We should do something. And there would be a kinetic event that occurred because we would see each other recognizing the same thing, right? One, it's the same thing. Two, there's danger potential that's risking our civilization, our tribe, or whatever you want to call it, because we are gathering in a local store. So we should know each other because we're neighbors, right? Well, we don't. And that event should draw people in, and it's like brain synapses. Each person starts popping with the same recognition or understanding. Before you know it, you've got 50 people, maybe it's 100 people, and then that brainwave activity, they spread out, they get in action, they're talking to their neighbors, they're talking to whoever, they're mobilized. That synapse activity begins to multiply, that energy begins to multiply, and then the next thing you know, whether or not you believe the 100th monkey effect, next thing you know, the guy down the street all of a sudden knows about chemtrails, and he's never even stepped outside. It just becomes a natural fact. And our overlords know this. That's why they keep us atomized. We cannot allow the synaptic effect of humanity gathered together to happen, because it's energy and it creates results. And it's just, so they're just divide, warfare, and they keep us from that. So if we can download this information, and just enough people are putting it out there, eventually we could have an effect, right? It'll just become the 100th monkey effect. But we don't have enough out there. There's not enough of us yet. So we just got to keep fighting. So anyway, that was the point of this comment, was really just how these various groups are going to be fighting in the streets against each other, and one of them are the good guys. One of those groups will be the good guys, and we're going to have to know which ones it is. I don't think we're going to be wearing uniforms. So it's going to be a hell on earth time, folks, and that's what they're planning for us. Okay, and see, it's all intentional. This is a developed plan. Psychologists, sociologists, this is what they're going to do. This is called breaking the morale through the strategy of terror. Back the pawns in the game 250 years ago, Reign of Terror, they talked about it. This is just the more sophisticated version of it. It's been used for hundreds of years to conquest and conquer societies. Bring in a reign of terror to create complete terror, create chaos, complete chaos, break everything down, and they come in as the saviors. Well, they're the ones that unleash the terror in the first place. So we're all going. It's just another exercise in the Hegelian dialectic. They just keep running the same play on us over and over again, and people keep falling for it because we're not awake. Well, a lot of us are, but not enough. In fact, we're talking about two sides of the same coin. On one side, guiding the covert, subtle manipulation and control of thought and human consciousness. Guiding the covert, subtle manipulation and control of thought and human consciousness through the power of television. And what I just described about that parking lot at a Target store, that is also manipulation, control of thought of human consciousness in a positive way. They're controlling the brainwaves. When the Carlson Putin interview hit the airwaves. I noticed immediately on Twitter, awaiting Biden's remarks. They have to stop the synapses. They can't allow the message to start spreading. So they've got to put the counter message out there to mute the original message. And you know what? It works. It works. That's why they run it over and over. Whenever something happens, they're either preempt it by putting out propaganda to frame a narrative that then when the real narrative comes up, people don't believe it. Or they attack it immediately on the backside to diminish it and marginalize it. And it works. So we're constantly under attack for trying to get the message out. And this is sort of what they're saying here is that they've got to guide the covert, subtle manipulation and control of thought and human consciousness through the power of television, in particular, and entertainment in general. You know what a TV was called when I was a kid? In the 60s? It's called the boob tube. Because you were a boob if you watched it. Like a little zombie. And now it's just normal. Everybody's just glued to the TVs. They knew it was a boob tube. Society was not we were not a nation of just TV watchers all the time, where it was just the center of our home and the center of our conversation because of the latest show or the latest sporting event or the latest whatever. It was the boob tube. We had 3 channels. That's all we needed, and we were fine. So that just struck me when I was reading this. And because they're telling you the power that the television has to control you. It's called programming for a reason. Television programming. You're being programmed. Turn it off. Or at least know you're being programmed and you can diminish some of the effects of it. Employed on an ever-growing list of those deemed as enemies, that's of course television in particular and entertainment in general, employed on an ever-growing list of those deemed as enemies of America, patriots, as well as on a confused and agitated American public, whose corporate news networks frame and manage an increasingly shallow narrative while engaging in a kind of Orwellian kabuki theater of fairness and balance, while on the other side, directly and overtly shifting the paradigm, changing the basic concepts, widening the parameters, and changing the playing field and all the rules of play by which society defines itself within an exceptionally short period of time. Man, basically just mind-fucking those people. It's just that simple. That's all it is, every day. And that's why I'm not watching Super Bowl, okay? It's just, forget, I don't care. I tried watching football this year, and it just was maddening. The programming, the mind control, the repetition, the fakery of it, the bread and circus of it, the blithering blind masses just gobbling it up in the stands, oblivious to everything else. I just couldn't handle it. And I'm done. I'm out. I'd been out for 5 or 6 years, thought I'd try it again this year. No, I'm out. It's just pop culture toxic garbage. All right. Play, exceptionally short period of time. One of the key individuals involved in psychological warfare against the population through manufactured social turbulence is Kurt Lewin. Here's another big name, a pioneer in group dynamics who was part of the early Frankfurt School and fled Germany when Hitler took power. Okay, do you know the history of the Frankfurt School? All this stuff. I mean, the Frankfurt School is where the early Marxist pioneers, sort of the think tank. It was in Germany during that time, in the 20s or so. It's before Hitler took power. And this is history they don't want you to know because, in Hitler is evil. All the things he did were horrible, okay? But what was happening in Germany at the time, they were being overrun by communists, okay? The Bolsheviks had taken over Russia, 1917. Germany's right around the corner. The communist push was huge during that time over in that part of the world. And so they had a huge commie problem. Frankfurt School was thriving. They were developing all this radical theory, culture rot, all of it, Marxist ideology. And that's really what paved the way for Hitler to come to power, folks, because he saw it, and he saw the message of populism and nationalism and anti-communism, right? And that's when the commies created the anti-fascists in response to Hitler. So I'm not at all advocating anything Hitler did, but I'm saying you got to understand the whole context of what was going on. And he got rid of the commies. He did a lot of bad things, but he got rid of the commies, and that was and that's why they're using it today to kind of turn Trump and the MAGA into another version of Hitler. Well, no, nobody's wanting to exterminate anybody or have a state-run, corporate, whatever, monopoly on all the influences of capitalism. I mean, that's, national socialism. It's not a right. It's equated to the right, but the word socialism. There's nothing right or right-leaning about socialism. And it's because it's national socialism doesn't make it right-leaning. But anyway, Frankfurt School, Hitler kicked them out, or scared them off, ran them out, whatever. You know where they came? To America. Where do all radical commies come? To spread the word, right? Of Marx and Lenin and Trotsky and all the others. So they came to America, and in America, they settled in the Columbia University, of course. And that's when it started here. Okay, the commies got a good foothold here with these maniacs. I forget their names. You can read up all about it. I first got on my radar days over 15, 18 years ago when I Googled who stole my culture. And a really well-written article about the Frankfurt School and cultural Marxism came up and explained a lot for me at the time. Okay, so we're getting through it. We're just about there. Well, actually, we got a couple more pages, so I'll try to speed up a little bit here. Because all this stuff, it's just so, I can go on and on about all of them. They touch on so many things that are of historical significance. It's not just about reading this one document. It's about understanding all of the other intricacies that connect with it and all the other people, organizations, processes, psyops, warfare, all of it that's being unleashed on us right now. It's happening right now. And you just want to train yourself to see it. That's all. Okay. Let's see. Hitler took power. The passage from his book. So this is Kurt Lewin. The passage from his book, Time, Perspective, and Morale, shows his understanding of psychological warfare. That's what we're under. Psychological warfare. PSYOPs. One of the main techniques for breaking morale through a strategy of terror. That's one of their buzz phrases. Strategy of terror. Commies love it. Consists in exactly this tactic. Keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. If in addition frequent vacillations between severe disciplinary measures and promises of good treatment, together with spreading of contradictory news, make the cognitive structure of this situation utterly unclear, then the individual may cease to even know when a particular plan would lead toward or away from his goal. Under these conditions, even those who have definite goals and are ready to take risks will be paralyzed by severe inner conflicts in regard to what to do. And that's the confusion that they create. I'm starting to see some of that. I don't know if you are. An example of that where you get conflicting messages is you've got people like Elon Musk coming out now as pro whatever you want to label it, truther, patriot, America, MAGA, whatever, and First Amendment. So a lot of people lining up behind him. I mean, it's just amazing how people are influenced by rhetoric. And he's doing some good things. I'm still 99.9% shadow banned, so some of what he's saying is just talk. But last week, and so everybody just thinks he's now on our side, right? There's this side and that side. Well, this is saying that it's going to get harder and harder to determine, okay? And what did he do last week? What did he come out and say last week? The only, I don't remember the exact phrase, but the only reasonable way to tackle climate change is to impose a carbon tax. Thank you, Elon Musk. So, who are you? Will the real patriot please step forward? It's just, I contend he's pawn on the field. He's playing his part, and that doesn't mean we don't rally and kind of help push him in the right direction as best we can. But he's going to do what he's going to do. I'm going to be shadow banned. He's not going to fix that. There's only so much he can do, and some of it's just rhetoric, and the rest are just. I think you're a fool if you just line up behind him like he's this great. Oh, Elon Musk for president. No. He's part of the structure. So, sorry to tell you. All right. Over the past 50 years, research in the fields of psychology, sociology, psychiatry has shown that there are clearly marked limits to the amount of changes in nature of them that the mind can deal with. So they want to overwhelm our thinking. So, Policy Research Institute, Science Policy Research Unit, Tavistock Institute. That's just another think tank. It's developing policies that are dragging us to hell, folks. You look at their website; they're all benevolent, and it's just all a front. Edward Bernays, okay, public relations. You're in a giant system of control. All right, Tavistock's facility future shocks is defined as physical and psychological distress arising from the excess load on the decision-making mechanism of the human mind. A series of events which come so fast that the human brain cannot absorb the information. One scenario is called superficiality. After continuous shocks, according to Emery and Trist, the large targeted population group discovers that it does not want to make choice anymore, reducing the value of his intentions. This strategy can only be pursued by denying the deeper roots of humanity that bind people together on a personal level by denying their individual psyche. It's breaking us down. Apathy takes over, often preceded by mindless violence, such as is characteristic of the Los Angeles street gangs in the 60s and the 80s, what Emery and Trist call organized social response to dissociation, as described in the pages of Anthony Burgess' novel, A Clockwork Orange. Well, that was a real piece of work. If you haven't seen that, I watched that as like a 14-year-old when it first came out. I think my little brain was prepared to, absorb what was really going on in front of me. Probably shouldn't have watched it, but, didn't really have that influence to stop me from watching it. So I watched all kinds of stuff I probably shouldn't have. All right, Clockwork Orange, a society dominated by infantile animal-like rage. Such a group becomes easy to control and will docilely follow orders without rebelling. Ah, yes. Docilely follow orders without rebelling. And I think, we're starting to see this, man. It's all coming. Dissociated adults cannot exert moral authority over their children because they are too involved with their own infantile fantasies brought to them through their television set. Look at the older generation today as they have accepted the moral decadence of the no future generation of its children rather than seek conflict. And in the process, the adults have come to accept a lower moral standard. Okay, rather than seek conflict. Seek conflict. This is a big deal right here because I'm kind of in this, I'm kind of moving into this, the older generation. And in past times, when times were simpler, communities were smaller, if evil was building, at a certain point, the adults did something about it. Pitchforks and torches, right? And, I, for most of my life, had just rolled with things. And I accepted the moral decadence of the times that I was raised in. And it really, this one got me because it's only been the last, 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, 2009, a little bit before, almost 20 years, where I really started to feel that sense of obligation and protection that as men especially we're supposed to feel when it comes to protecting our communities. And what he's saying here is rather than seek conflict, see, that's the decision point. For us to do anything would require conflict, and we have stood down. Okay, we've stood down. And we're still standing down. And what can we do today? It's evolved to such a point that really, standing up to it is not a good idea right now. So I am not at all recommending that. That's a losing strategy to try to fight this head on. No way, no how. Do not engage at that level. That's foolish. So, and when things change, we'll know what to do when things happen. I don't know what that looks like, but he's right. This is where we are. Just as in Aldous Huxley's Drug Control Brave New World, there are no moral or emotional choices to make here. The Flower Children, they especially helped create this, and the drug soaked rebellion of the Vietnam era is a perfect example of how this scenario functions. While depending on what you read and believe, that whole counterculture movement was orchestrated by the CIA. So, it's worked spectacularly to drive a wedge in our culture and change the values and morals big time. We're living the 60s hippies counterculture. That's become mainstream. The traditional values, God-based, Ten Commandments, right and wrong culture is now in the fridges and on the run. So They've been very effective. If the turbulence does not cease, I think we're just about done here. If turbulence does not cease or it is intensified, then at a certain point, people cease being able to adapt in a positive way. According to Tristan Emery, people become maladaptive. They choose a response to tension that degrades their lives. They start to repress reality, denying its existence, and constructing increasingly more infantile fantasies that enable them to cope. And I think a lot of this, if you just have a strong mind, you can fight a lot of these sort of natural tendencies that they say occur, through all the conditioning and testing that they've done. But I think if you have a strong mind, you can fight this, as I'm doing. Under the conditions of increasing social turbulence, people change their values, yielding to new degraded values that are less human and more animal-like. And I've mentioned that they're taking us away from, sort of the civil society, Western civilization, Magna Carta values to tribal, might makes right values, because that is the first rule of Satan. Do what thou wilt. And that's what they're doing. The second scenario is segmentation of society into smaller parts. In this scenario, it is every group, ethnic, racial, and sexual against the other. We're seeing that. We just keep getting divided into smaller and smaller groups. Enhancement of in-group and out-group prejudices as people seek to simplify their choices. The natural lines of social divisions emerge to become barricades, which is happening. There's just no room for negotiation anymore. Look at what Democrats have done to their opponents in the Republican Party. They're creating a demonization or engaged in a demonization campaign that's going to eventually lead to unbelievable violence against those people. And it's something, I can't find it, but I wrote it almost 15 years ago. It said, there will come a day, because I saw it then with the rhetoric when Obama was halfway into his first term. The rhetoric of Obama was like, wow, this is, I've seen this in history. And I said, and I wish I could find, I've read every blog post I ever did back then. I just can't find it. I know I wrote it somewhere. That eventually this is going to get to a point where they're going to be rounding people like you and me up, dragging us out of our houses and taking us away to not a good end. And our neighbors are going to be applauding it. And at the time, it sounded insane. But look at the demonization. Look at how far it's gone and how bad it is. That's coming if we can't turn this around. It's the same program that Hitler used, okay? People were applauding the removal of Jews from their homes and from their businesses. They were applauding them being rounded up and taken to concentration camps. Those people were just as human as we are. It was the German civilization that got just absolutely blasted with propaganda that's being used on us today. And people are falling for it. And I saw somebody said something to that effect that, the white Christian is today's Jew from, Germany under Hitler. And they were just the response to that was just so hostile and negative. It was just such an absurd, and how dare you, and how can you even believe, and say, no, because only the Jews can be victims of this. And no, and this, I won't even get into that. No, this is happening. And people that are trying to say that, again, the minute you bring Hitler, the Jews into it, you all of a sudden, now you become part of that conversation, and then it gets hijacked and marginalized to some kind of crazy talk. But it's a program of propaganda that's been used in other countries effectively, and they're now doing it here. So we need to wake up to it. All right, social divisions emerge to become barricades. The Strategic Trends Report has an answer for that as well. Increasingly, non-state actors will be wielded by a broader spectrum of individuals and agencies, even by criminal, terrorist, and insurgency groups, as a means of complementing their more coercive, violent activities. These groupings will be highly volatile, dissolving either when interests are achieved or when more favorable opportunities present themselves, with those least constrained by legal accountability or moral considerations, the most likely to be effective at manipulating the use of soft power. So when it's time for Antifa or BLM to take some people out, they have the moral consideration. They have the soft power. They're more likely to be effective. If the target group, the white American, whatever you want to call that, tries to do something, you're going to jail. So that's why any kind of, The playing field is tilted. And that's what this is saying here. Society's response, I think we're just about, one more page. Okay, society's response to such psychological political disintegration is the Orwellian fascist state model on George Orwell's book, 1984. In the book, Big Brother regulates the lives and conflicts of people within a society, a never-ending conflict. This never-ending conflict is foreseen in strategic trends reports. So they're created. Information communication technology likely to be so pervasive that people are permanently connected to a network or two-way data stream with inherent challenges to civil liberties being disconnected can be considered suspicious. So if you're not part of the hive mind, you're suspicious. So it becomes part of the checklist that they will use to determine who to round up, who not to round up. Rapid mobilization, flash mobs may be undertaken by states, terrorists, and criminals. It may involve dispersed communities across international boundaries, challenging security forces to match this potential agility and ability to concentrate. I just mentioned that. I mean, it's a source of power for them. They control it all. Crucially, this level of sophistication, I think this is we're at the end here. Crucially, this level of sophistication will require a concerted, comprehensive application of all the instruments and agencies of state power, together with cooperation from all relevant authorities and organizations involved in settling a crisis or resolving a conflict. What does it mean? It means martial law, of course. With resistance broken, the third future shocks scenario is the most intense, involving a withdrawal and retreat into private world and a withdrawal from social bonds that might entail being drawn into the affairs of others. Trist and Emery are convinced that men will be willing to accept the perverse inhumanity of man that characterized Nazism, not necessarily the structure of the Nazi state, but the moral outlook of Nazi society. To survive in such a state, people will either have to submit to the state or go underground. All likely future opponents will have recognized the advantages of going underground. I saw about underground stuff. I can pass on that. Techniques for overcoming resistance, comprehensive application of all the instruments. Okay, this is a mouthful. Let me just techniques for overcoming resistance, comprehensive application of all the instruments and agencies of state power, rapid mobilization, flash mobs, pervasive information communications technology, segmentation of society, endemic lawlessness and high levels of violence, intrusive, highly responsive and accessible databases, the emergence of surveillance society, erosion of civil liberties, humanitarian catastrophe. Woohoo! That's a mouthful. This is what the near future looks like, not 20, 50 years from now. The near future. We instinctively reject such conclusions even if they are supported by solid evidence in Bilderberg. And this is him saying no. We instinctively reject such conclusions even if they are supported by solid evidence in the Bilderberg authored and government prepared secret report, which is what I've just been articulating to you. And he's saying, no, we reject it as I reject it. But I'm also saying they're rolling it out, they're implementing it. It's up to us to stand against it. And we don't have to be violent. We don't have to. We just have to say no. On a grand scale, we just say no. And then they have to stand down. They will stand down. I believe that they will. They want to steamroll us, and if we get violent, they're going to steamroll us. But if we just stand up and say no, do not comply, universal noncompliance. And if they'll do a calculation and realize they're all going to lose because they will be mercilessly, I don't even want to finish that. They know they'll lose, let's put it that way, if we all stand up. Okay, however, we must have the courage to let the evidence tell the story. This is the evidence. Because as the reader will learn, what is at stake is not simply our view of reality. Whether or not our worldview is challenged or shattered by the revelations in this material doesn't change the truth of the matter, which is that the conspiracy is real, that it is ongoing, and that September 11th was just a prelude to what they have planned for us. We are truly at the gates of hell, and the roads we take will now terminate whether we will live in the 21st century as nation-state republics or subjugated, cold, and dehumanized crop of slaves. Well put. Exactly how I would have said it. That's why I'm reading it. I read stuff that just, bam, it just nails it. I want to share it. And so this is the preface to this book. So I'm looking forward to getting into it and reading a little more of it. So how I wanted to kind of finish this is, kind of summarizing that they've built this system. They're rolling it out. They have the power to roll it out, and they're anticipating a certain level of compliance. We have to push back beyond their ability to mathematically quantify a successful path of their conquest of us. And I believe that we can do that. But it's going to take a lot more people to wake up. and there may be some difficulties between now and then, you know, as we start to do that. But I'm telling you, I'm ready. I'm ready. I live every act and action of my life is a statement of noncompliance to this system. I categorically reject all of it every day with every breath that I take. Now, they haven't come and tried to force any of it on me. You know, they did with the vaccine. Nope, didn't take it. And there's other things they're going to try to force on us. And if you comply, that's part of their mathematical equations, silent weapons for quiet wars. If you comply, the more you do, the more it builds in their favor to continue to the next step. This is critical. This is a chess game. And they are measuring every action and reaction. And it's up to us to give them the reaction that tells them to stand down. Now, I don't know. I don't know if we can stop it, but can we push it back? And for the love of God, think of the children, your children and grandchildren. They have no future if they stick to this agenda and this time frame. It's absolute hell on earth. And so every day I'm putting it out there. That's all that matters to me. That's the most important thing, because everything that comes after that is built on the civil society that we need to protect right now, because they're trying to tear it down. And all those things that come after it, all of your priorities and interests and hobbies and activities and the things you love and the things you do, and all of that is a byproduct of having a civil society to enjoy those freedoms and liberties. And right now that's in jeopardy, that's at stake. And so this needs to take priority. We still got to go to work, we still got to pay the bills, still got to do the things that we do every day. But every breath you take should be an act of universal non-compliance at every measure. Reject the programming from the TV, reject the ads, reject the recommendations, reject the next steps that we're supposed to take in order to respond, whatever, the next outbreak, whatever. Reject it all. Everything that comes from them is poison and toxic and meant to harm and eventually kill us. Reject it all every day. And try to wake the people up around you. That's hard. It's easier to reject all this than it is to wake people up to it. So anyway, all right, that is it for today. Thanks for hanging in there. I really appreciate it. Again, the book is let's go, me. I don't want to get it wrong. TransEvolution, The Coming Age of Human Deconstruction by Daniel Estulin. That was just the preface. It was written in 2014. I'm sure the book itself will be an excellent read. Like I said, I'm looking forward to getting into it. So anyway, we'll see what comes up next time. Until then, hope you have a good one, and I'll talk to you later. All right.